Hello and welcome to Rolling in Mills. One idea that has always interested me when watching film is, how is reality constructed in film? And as a continuation of that, what is reality in film? Well, this is where someone like Béla Tarr comes in. Béla Tarr is a Hungarian filmmaker best known for films like the Werckmeister Harmonies, Satantango, and the Turin Horse. So what makes a Tarr film a Tarr film? Well, for one, after 5 minutes the film probably hasn't cut from the first shot, due to Tarr's usage of very long shots for the entirety of his films. For example, Werckmeister Harmonies is 145 minutes, but has only 39 shots, while Tarr's behemoth Satantango is an astonishing 432 minutes, but has only 150 shots, making the average shot length for that film nearly 3 minutes. Compare that to the Bourne Supremacy, which has an average shot length of 1.9 seconds. So what else besides shooting long shots? It's not like that hasn't been done before with Tarkovsky, or Hsiao-Hsien, or Terrence, Malick, or Alfonso, Cuarón. I mean, there are films that have been done in a single long shot, or made to look like one. Well, how about shooting your films in black and white, despite being made well after colour film was invented? Or shooting scenes in which nothing happens? Shooting the spaces between the takes, the characters walking to locations, characters cleaning, things that have nothing to do with the narrative. How about starting the film in the middle of the plot, setting up 5 separate backstories for 5 hours, and then ending without resolving anything? How about repetition, 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 the pointlessness of existence, fear, paranoia, decay, the void? But even then, it's not like these techniques haven't been done before us to play around with reality. Neo-realism was all about showing characters doing mundane things, with these characters often being poor and victims of circumstance.
Filmmaking is perhaps more difficult today. After the war, there were real scorching issues surrounding everybody who was making films.
This was a response from the Italians to the devastation of World War II, but in the same way, Tarr's filmmaking was evidently influenced by Hungary's horrific experience with communism. As Corrali says, Hungary witnessed a dramatic rise in the unemployment rate and a national debt that reached intolerable levels, which is why Tarr's films often show some of the most dilapidated, run-down, and depressing locations you'll see in all of cinema. So Tarr used the same technique that the neo-realists did and was influenced by a similar tragedy. But what can this style actually do for your film? Well, you can get wonderful scenes like this one in Vittorio de Sica's Umberto D. Here we see Maria, a poor maid working for an abusive rich woman. Maria is pregnant, but the father could be one of 2 men, and neither wish to support the child. If Maria's boss finds out she's pregnant, she'll be fired. Quite a difficult position for a character to be in, and one very indicative of neo-realist cinema. But in this scene, we actually take a break from the narrative, which isn't even about Maria. We see Maria enter the kitchen she works in, strike a match, fail, strike another and light the stove. She walks through and looks out the window, seeing a cat climbing on the adjacent roof. She then goes back to her work. And that's the scene. Now, Tarr has quite a similar style, but uses this break from the narrative far more commonly. While there are slight detours from the plot in a film like Umberto D or most of the neo-realist film, Tarr's Satantango is almost like a 7.5-hour detour. But besides that, what makes Tarr's usage of neo-realist techniques so markedly different? Well, part of this has to do with the concept of the seer, created by philosopher and film analyst Gilles Deleuze. Now, The Seer is not only a fantastic album by experimental rock outfit The Swans, but a somewhat confusing concept relating to the way in which characters interact with their world. I think film analyst Marchant describes it best when he says, but in neo-realism, the looker, or seer in this case, is struck by something in the image without being sure what, and without being able to translate it into a direct action or response. The character sees something, like Maria glancing up to see the cat, but here she sees something beyond the cat that we can only theorize. Perhaps she sees a freedom from her poverty and general situation, or perhaps she simply sees nothing in this image. Tarr creates environments perfect for seer characters. By showing his characters going through the mundanity of life in full, you would expect his characters to have the time to look up and see something beyond the world that they live in, but they don't. Let's take the scene from Werckmeister Harmonies, in which main character Janos cleans his house. Quite a comparable scene to the one in Umberto D, but here, Janos sees nothing. He keeps his head down in a constant state of misery and blindness. There is one scene in which Janos finally does look up, staring into the eye of a dead, stuffed whale, a reference to the Hobbesian symbol for the state. The importance here is not that Janos sees something in the whale, but that he sees anything at all. And that is in essence what Tarr's films are about, forcing us to look at something in its totality, like watching a group of characters dance aimlessly for 10 minutes, with the point being that there is nothing of substance here, because there is nothing of substance in these characters' lives. Tarr shows us his depiction of reality in full, a boring, repetitive, meaningless, depressing mess. It's like putting blinders on a horse and then forcing it to stare at a blank wall. The eye of the camera and the eye of the characters that we're so used to seeing and perceiving are shown the maximum extent of reality, yet see nothing. Even suffering becomes so repetitive and boring that it is meaningless. Take Tarr's last film, The Turin Horse, for example. This film follows a father-daughter and their sick horse as they play out their horrid existence. The film constantly repeats these characters drinking large amounts of brandy, eating only boiled potatoes, and enduring difficult weather and strenuous labour. But even this horrid existence becomes so repetitive that it is meaningless to us. Tarr's cinema almost takes on the perspective of the universe, this cold, distant and uncaring entity, even showing us the greatest depths of depravity, the saddest, most pathetic characters. Tarr's camera makes no comment, it simply shows us. There's no emotive music cues and no psychological framing for these events. So let's look at a scene in Werckmeister that's indicative of this, where an angry mob raids a hospital. Here we see a disturbing event playing out, the beating and murder of innocent old people. But this is made more disturbing by the camera saying nothing. Normally in cinema, the camera is not only the director's eye, but our own vicarious eye and portal into the film. As such, we expect scenes to be shot in ways that make sense emotionally to us, and for the soundtrack to aid this feeling. For example, this scene in the hands of another director might have a sorrowful song over it, while we cut to close-ups of the murderers' faces. In Werckmeister, it's disturbing to us that the eye of the camera does not agree with our own perception of reality. We want sad music to rise during the beating and murder of these characters, and we especially want the camera to say to us, this is disturbing and disgusting. Furthermore, the lack of cutting means we have no escape, we have no reprieve from the disgust we feel. We're kind of like Alex in A Clockwork Orange, forced to watch on and unable to close our eyes. But how effective is this technique? Regardless of whether you think Tarr makes good or bad films, his connection between technique and theme is very strongly linked. Ironically, this is best seen in the criticism of his films, that being that his films are boring, repetitive, meaningless, depressing, slow, and bleak. And what were the recurring themes of his films again? But how is reality constructed in film though? And what is filmic reality? Well, my response to that is this.